Welcome back to GaleForceWins Season 2.
The GaleForceWins podcast is proudly sponsored by Newfound Marketing, a digital marketing agency located in St. John's, Newfoundland. Visit our website at newfoundmarketing.ca to find out how we can help your business grow. Newfound Marketing, a complement to your marketing team.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jerry Carew, and I am one half of GaleForceWins. Today, Alan is not with us. He is in PEI and couldn't join us. But I am here with someone, Ritche Perez. We were doing some work for another client. Ritche was actually interviewing me for something. And I said to him through email, would you be willing to sit on GaleForceWins? And he agreed. This is an interesting one for me, Ritche, because this is your setup, your camera, your lights, your audio, which I normally set up. And it's very nice to be able to just sit here and have you do all that work. But I just want to say thank you for joining us on GaleForceWins. One of the things I was saying to Ritche is that we do very little preparation because we, myself and Alan, who own GaleForceWins, want to get to know the person just like you as you watch this. So Ritche, let's go ahead. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ritche. Well, Ritche, and I'm a photographer. I do a lot of other things, musician, video. I love computers. I was born in the Philippines, moved here back in 1977. I'm 48 years old. And I work at Memorial University. That's my day job as a multimedia specialist. But on my passion is photography.
So, I'm going to dig into this. So you came here in 1976, and I did do a little bit of research on you, I won't lie. Can you tell us a little bit about, what brought you here, and, you've stayed here ever since?
Yes, yeah.
And I noticed your mom doesn't live here anymore. She lives back in the Philippines.
Right, yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, Mom retired back in about 10, close to 10 years ago. And she worked at a company here in St. John's called Provincial Consultants. She was a secretary, accountant, and just retired. And she unfortunately was diagnosed with Parkinson's a few years back, and just decided to live her life back where she was born, where she grew up. So she's living with family members. Her brothers and sisters are back there in a place called Dumalag on an island in Philippines. And moving here it's kind of interesting because I'm still kind of figuring out how we got here. My parents were very traditional. They didn't say much, or they didn't talk about much of us of why we've moved. But I've heard stories about, Marcos was in power back in the late 70s, and there was fear. It went under martial law. My dad was working with the military out there, so they kind of monitored him out there. We were kind of worried about that when my mother was, and we moved here. We moved here sponsored in by my Aunt Emily, who was a nurse working at the Janeway Apartments at the time. From what I know of, a lot of Filipino nurses were stationed here, were working here back in the 60s and 70s, and one of them was my aunt who was here.
I always found it interesting, talking to someone like yourself. My sister married a young man from Kenya, and I love the perspective of someone who wasn't born here. Now, pretty well. How old were you when you actually got here?
Three. Yeah.
So you're more a Newfoundlander than anyone else because you actually came here. But what's your perspective having a Filipino background? And I know you say you love Newfoundland. Why is that?
Well, just from all the years of experience of growing up here, you get attached to places that you've lived here for a long time, and I've gained a lot of friends and family, and my kids are living and growing up here. But I went back for the first time and rediscovered my Filipino culture just a few years back, and that's a kind of a journey in my 40s now, is trying to understand and ask myself what I've missed out on from moving here. And so I find that this is my home, but also I'm rediscovering that I had another home that I'm trying to learn about now. So I try to go back every year visiting my mother and also roam around and learn about the culture out there. Unfortunately, the pandemic happened, and so I haven't been back in close to 3 years now, and so.
Well, when you get there, how do you find it in terms of navigating around? Because you were 3 when you came here.
Yeah.
You speak, how many languages do you speak?
Well, I grew up listening to my parents speak Tagalog. That's the Filipino language, and growing up here, you lose. I find as a kid growing up, you lose that language because you immerse yourself into Canadian culture, Newfoundland culture, and the majority at the time in the 80s, well, it was English, and so I started speaking English. I was only 3 too, so I was learning my language as well. So I was learning. I've become used to speaking English and understanding my parents speaking Tagalog. So the dynamics in our home would be they'd speak to us in Tagalog and we'd speak back in English, and I completely forgot my language until going back and forth there in the recent years, the Philippines. I found that I had to learn the language to be able to function, to get around places in Philippines again.
How hard was that for you?
It actually wasn't too bad because I felt like it was always in my blood, but like it got somewhere, like it resided somewhere in my brain. But as I started talking to people, words started coming up again, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. So like I like when I go to cab drives when I needed to go to places. Initially, it was speaking in English, but then I found there was like this weird barrier, and I wanted to immerse myself in the culture. So the second time I went, I was prepared to speak like gusto kong papunta diyan, like like that's it was my simplified version was like I want to go over there.
That's in a thick Newfoundlandese note. Isn't it? People they must look at you and say, where the heck is this guy from?
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they still write. Like, I find that I try to be immersed and in as like wondering if they wouldn't know if I was from away or not. But I think Filipinos do see you. They call it balikbayan. Like if you're a Filipino that has returned to Philippines. Living from away, you would be called a balikbayan, which means a comeback, like a come from away. And they recognize it because of your body language, the accent and how you speak in Filipino, and you're still kind of feeling a little bit of an outsider when you go back to your home country.
Interesting.
So yeah.
But it seems like you're really coming alive now that you're reconnecting with your roots. Hey?
Yeah, I don't know if it's being in your 40s that you're recognizing all the things that you want, or it's my interest in knowing about my culture. It must be a combination of all of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I've gone through half my lifespan, hopefully half of my lifespan, not earlier, but or later, or majority of this lifespan. But I feel like this is the time to learn about where I'm from, and how it was and what it could have been like. All those things go through my head, of like wondering what it would have been like if I stayed there, if my parents didn't bring us here. And, sitting down at a table one day with my dad, I asked like, Dad, why did you bring us here to Canada, Newfoundland? And his simple answer to that was to give you guys a better life. And that stuck to me for a long time. It's still in the back of my head as well, is to have a better life, and it's such a subjective answer because I appreciate that as well, of what he meant by that. But I go back and I see my family living out there, and there's a lot of hardship going on as well. But I wonder sometimes what it'd been like to live there.
Well, when you said something about your dad, when he was in the military and he was being monitored, I can only imagine how he must have felt, and what that's the lack of freedom that he had, I guess.
Well, I read about this martial law and this and Marcus being in power, and I didn't realize the social injustices until I actually just started reading up on like online and stuff about the history of the martial law and what happened in the Philippines in the late 70s and 80s, and there were like 50,000 people that disappeared, and a lot more that were like a lot of things that were pretty scary at the time. So I can understand why my family decided to do that. for for all of us.
So your dad, he's passed away, has he?
Yes, yeah. My dad, Oscar Perez, he passed away in 2008 with from diabetes, and he worked with Memorial University at St. Clair's for a long time as a biomedical technologist. And from what I hear, biomeds, there weren't many around back in the day. The biomedical technologists at the time were fixing hospital machines, heart respirators. My dad would get like calls at the middle of the night having to go over there to repair stuff because it was vital to have things running for patients who were on things such as a heart respirator. And there were only like 2 or 3 biomedical technologists at the time. And he was very savvy with electrical. Like, he was an engineer, but he was not qualified. His degree was not qualified to be an engineer here in Canada. So he did other jobs, and he started his own company with a friend, an engineer, local engineer, Custom Systems Electronics, that did stuff for like satellite.
Really?
Satellites and satellite dishes and boats and stuff like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, he was very experimental too, because sometimes he would make things like try to invent things. He would show up and go, "Richie, look at this," and I would say, "What is this, Dad?" And he was like, "It's a diaper that senses. It's a baby diaper that senses if it's wet or not." So it was something that would give off a sound or buzz if it got wet. And I was like, "But Dad, can you electrocute babies with this?"
Hopefully not.
Yeah. So it was like funny to see his experiments. He was like the mad scientist sometimes, and my friends and I would always laugh at that. And
It's amazing. It sounds like you had an amazing relationship with your dad.
it was a little. I don't know, like it was a traditional dad with a military background. There was the side that I saw a lot with him was a stoic kind of, like the father that that didn't say much, but every once in a while he would open up, and he was a good dad. He would take us out on road trips across Canada, Newfoundland. He loved fishing and camping, so it was nice to see him do that.
You know, Richie, I think about as you're talking, it's one thing to grow up here like you did. It's another thing to be your mom and dad.
Yeah.
Plucking themselves out of the Philippines at a challenging time.
Yeah.
And then land in Newfoundland of all places. Did they speak English before they got here?
I think they did because from what I know in the schools now, when I went back to Philippines, that you are taught English at school out there. So English would be kind of pretty much the universal language.
Sort of like French here, I guess. Second language,
Yeah. So they knew English, not the best. Like, they would still converse in Filipino, but they had the skill set to be able to communicate at work when they came here. Landing in Newfoundland. The interesting thing is like, well, we came here because my aunt worked here as a nurse, and my parents loved living here. As most other of their friends ended up going west for the bigger communities of Filipino communities, such as like Toronto, BC, Alberta. But we, out of most of the Filipino, like we stayed I liked our city here to be able to stay here as well. I feel like I'm part of a community here.
Yeah.
So I managed
It's, as I said, I don't do a lot of research. I did do a little bit on you, staying a little bit into your childhood, delving in. I'm sure you're going to get this question a lot from people. I hear there's a little TV show that's got something about you in it. Tell us a little bit about that, Richie.
Oh, well, that's all Mark's. Mark Ritche and I were classmates at a school on Lundy Pond Road, St. Teresa's. And Mark Ritche wrote his books of Son of a Critch and his other, and we talked about a few years after his books were released, he approached and asked if I was interested in being part of a character on the show, and which works out great because we were classmates and we have a lot of stories to tell, and as one of the only Filipino kids growing up in Hard Knocks, Mundy Pond, I'm sure there was like a lot of stories to be told in like being the only kid on the street like that, dealing with bullying, and I'm sure Mark felt like an outsider as well in a different way. So he asked me to kind of help build stories on that. to just kind of show what it was like back then, because I'm sure, you know, that like a lot of bullying still happens, or racism and a lot of social injustices happen, especially when you're a kid growing up. But it was different, kind of different back then. It was a little bit more primitive, I guess.
So, touching on that, you know, the racism and that, I know you've had that happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
What has kept you to remain positive despite being thrust into those scenarios? What kept you going, you know, as a young person?
Well, I fought back and like just tried to help educate, and I'm sure like a lot of empathy as well, on other people, because like, you know, the show shows a lot that it was all about acceptance, and like I'm sure people who've come across, like who I've encountered with racism and stuff might have been going through like they're all influenced by their parents and all this and stuff, like, and just trying to help educate people around of how my experiences, and helping to empower other people who've experienced the same as well, and that's all how I try to live my life is just that, like, just to help empower people who've gone through the same shared experiences. And does that answer you?
I think it does.
Like,
I mean, for me,
yeah.
I grew up in, you know, privileged white male, but it's weird because I guess where my dad died young, you know, that put our lives into a bit of turmoil. But when I look at people, I don't look at gender, I don't look at sexual orientation, I don't look at race. I don't know why, and I find it really hard sometimes to understand why anyone would see those things. Like, we're just people trying to get along, right? You know?
Yeah.
So,
well, I can see it being a little bit of ignorance. Like, at the time back in the 80s, and I guess I can see how, like, some people have never seen a brown-skinned person before, or a black person before, and the reactions are like, people don't know how to react in that way, and that can be some of the aspects in it as well. But also, I find a lot of kids growing up are influenced by their parents, or like how their parents come home disgruntled, and like relaying all that stuff from their disgruntledness, or like someone pissed them off or something, you know, like that's all being influenced on the kid, and that's how a kid's upbringing ends up being if they're not intervened, or intervened by positive education. So maybe like those experiences happen, you know, like, and just being angry at the world, angry at things, and that, and finding a way to vent off or point fingers at, like the common thing of like stealing our jobs, or like all that stuff is the common things that we hear. Go back to your country, and like these are the common things that I hear.
What I always find in talking to you, you know, my brother-in-law's from Kenya, I've got another brother-in-law, his family's from India.
Yeah.
The ideas that you'll bring, like listening to you talk about your mom and dad and doing that, you know, there's so much that you bring to Newfoundland. I mean, you were 3 years old, so you couldn't be any more Newfoundland than you are. But I want to jump off this topic into, you know, you have a sideline business. So you're employed, but you have a sideline. And what I love about that, Ritchie, is that I had the same thing for 30 years.
Right.
In very similar, not photography. And by the way, your photography is amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah. Do you have a website, or is it just on Facebook right now? Where people find
I have I'm pretty active on social media, but my website is inbetweendays.ca.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see a bit of my portfolio and my work on there.
So, inbetweendays.ca.
Yeah.
Touch on that name for us.
Well, that's it's a song by one of my favorite bands called The Cure, and I just thought that the name In Between Days, in my interpretation, is just like more things in like that happen in between. Like my photography teacher, Shane Kelly, who I learned a lot from in photography, he would say this thing: don't forget to capture, Ritchie, the in-between shots. And how I interpret that is like, it's not the final shot, you know, it's not the put your hand here or pose. Oh, we got the shot. But it's the in between from getting to that stage, because that could be the ultimate shot is the natural movement to that shot. It's the candidness. It's just a definition of being a natural, like things happening naturally.
I like it.
And yeah, like that, and that's what I go for photography is I would go more for a person's personality by seeing how they are. If I take a picture of someone who's upset, like then they're upset. Like I'm not going to push someone to smile, if I don't have to. So that, and then that's what I mean by in between, I guess, and that's what in between days or in between shots. So
I love it. It conjures up so many things. The other thing that it conjured up for me is that a person like yourself doing a sideline business, you're in between days doing things, right?
Oh,
that's what first came to mind for me.
It could
right?
be. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
You can have that idea.
Okay.
And you can run with it.
I'll cash that one.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Ritchie. I shot wedding videos for 30 years, and I started working with Ross Squire's Memories Forever, and he taught me a lot. Thank you, Ross. But I agree with you. One of the things I always found a struggle for me is when I would shoot alongside the photographer, and the photographer's at a wedding, pose everybody. My job as the videographer was to be an event recorder of the day's thing, and I would very rarely want shots of the posed things. I would get shots of the little girl, the grandmother, just
engagement,
being human, right?
Yes, yeah.
But the other side of what I love about someone like yourself is the eye that you have, and being able to pick up on real life things is always fascinated me about photographers in particular,
Yeah, right.
So that's why I find you fascinating when you get into it.
Thank you.
And now you're morphing into video as well, right?
Well, yeah, that's kind of my side thing as well.
Your side gig.
Side gig, exactly. Yeah, many dimensions. Being dimensional, being diverse with technology, I guess, is key too. If you can, I find, and not just stick with one specific area. Well, because not growing up, but like in the industry, I started when the IT boom happened back in, they called it the IT boom, out in the mid 90s, and at the time, like when people were looking for website developers, graphic designers, all these different things, employers were looking for someone who was a jack of all trades at the time. There was no specialized. They wanted you to do the graphic design, and then they wanted you to do the HTML or 3D animation or cartooning and all this stuff. So with my with an artistic background, I got into doing technical, and that's how I remember, or how I felt like I had to be for many years to stay in the industry of like IT and stuff. And then you start seeing people being specialized in certain things, like you only do graphic design or you only do programming now.
So that brings me to the next question. You're currently employed in the IT industry. Did you do a formal background on that, or teach yourself? Or
no, I don't have a piece of paper. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Sometimes I feel guilty about it, but I'm self-taught. I did 1 year of textile studies at Cabot at the time, and at the end of that year, there was an American company called Wilderness Software. They were looking for an artist to train into the techie side. They kept referring to Steven Spielberg, or Steven Spielberg's movies, because I guess they were comparing it to like artists that are creating things through a technical, like 3D animation and all this stuff. You needed the artistic skill to be able to apply that into creating something that's beautiful, or like animations, like 3D images and stuff, using tools that were technical, that an engineer would have to learn how to do. So I got into doing that. I worked with the company for 3 years. I remember one of the projects was I had to reconstruct this car accident in a 3D application called 3D Studio, and I had to have the application learned in 2 weeks when I started working there to create a car, rear-ending another car, and it was very primitive animation, but that's what they needed, was like this representation to give to the lawyers for some accident scene. And it just got from that to other things there. And after they shortly closed down, I just went from one company to a web development company called Media Touch Technologies, run by Diane Hollett.
I'm very familiar. That was cutting edge for its day.
Yeah, there was only a few IT companies that started catering to web design and custom courses or like
touchscreen technology back in like the early 90s, for God's sake.
Yeah, stuff like that. So I hopped around in different places. Advertising agency with Bristol Communications. They hired me as a web designer, and that's where I learned a bit of video production, because they had many different entities of like video. They did commercials for the phone company, Hibernia, and then they had a website development department. So I learned a lot through that way, and went to Blue Drop for e-learning, and finally made my way over to Memorial University, where I think I'm going to retire. Yeah,
and you're involved in the IT side of things.
Yes, yeah, I'm now I'm what you call a multimedia specialist. So it's to help kind of support the Faculty of Medicine in any way, digitally or in rich media, such as like graphic design, video, or supporting conferencing, stuff like that.
Interesting. So the thing that I find fascinating in Newfoundland in particular, I think, it's one thing to be 100% devoted to an entrepreneurial endeavor. Mm-hmm. As I hear you talk, you have a job and you've got the sideline that's happening.
Right.
And that's what I did for 30 years, and I think there's something to that, Ritchie. Yeah. It's one thing to make money working for someone else, but I know on the weekends when I'd shoot weddings and things, the pride that I had in making a few dollars from scratch, it made me a better employee on Monday morning, frankly.
Right.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah. Like I feel with my side hustle of photography is me zoning into what I like to do and love to do, and like what I'm doing as my day job I love as well, but like I had to go out and find something that I enjoyed for myself, and that's how I think I got at that point. I also am a musician, and I remember as I was going through all these IT working at these IT places, I had this aspiration, or just this future goal, that I was going to be a rock star during the 90s. Yeah. Grunge was in, and we were playing music. I was in a band called Potato Bug, and we were pretty popular. We had a CD out and stuff, and the kids liked us, and I was going to think that I was going to drop all this IT technology stuff and be a person that was be a rock star, basically a rock star. And my mother said, you should always stick with what you're doing, your career with computers, because that's your, you're getting paid for it. You're secure with that, and you and have your music as your sideline. And I wanted it the other way around. I wanted to be like making money being a rocker. Yeah. And that never ever happened, but I still play music, and I'm still able to apply my music to through technology, the stuff that I'm learning on with computers and stuff, such as like being able to record your music, doing podcasts, the Co-Video Collective. I don't know if you know.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Geez, so many things.
Keep going.
So many.
As my podcast co-creator says, we have the whole internet.
Yeah. So many hobbies. Yeah. The Co-Video Collective was a thing that Brian, my friend who was in the band Potato Bug,
What's Brian's last name?
Brian Downton. Okay. Yeah, he played drums and I played guitar in our band, and we stuck together. Like we're still in touch, and we worked together really well as well. And we're familiar with computers. We know how to record music. We do video together and stuff like that. So we during when COVID started happening, we were all sent home. Everyone was like, okay, we're all like musicians. We were used to playing at shows, and we're not allowed to do that anymore. What do we do?
Yeah.
And so we started collaborating, recording music online, recording our tracks with our software and just sending it off back and forth to each other. And we were like, oh, well, if we could do this, make music through online, like through the internet, and mix music, write music, or and record music, why not do videos? And so we did. We created. We were all home alone. We had our webcams. We had our phones. Everything was accessible to create these things. That's the wonders of the now. So we stuck with a certain way of formatting to do it, and everyone sent the files to me. The bands that I was collaborating with, the videos, and I just edited them together, posted it online. One of our first songs was a cover of "Take on Me" by Aha, and it just got viral from the internet, from social media, because we were one of the first people to do it seriously. Like, because we didn't see anyone collaborating, making these videos 2.5 years ago, and we were spitting them out like every 2 days or so. We were like, hey, what song you want to do next? And we were trying to come up with more elaborate ideas of how to make stories within just us playing music. And I was reaching out to a lot of musician friends, people who did who danced. It wasn't just I wasn't just sticking with musicians, where like some people who were musicians 20 years ago were coming. I was asking to sing songs for the tunes and for the videos, and we've got 52 videos. And they're on my YouTube channel if you ever want to watch them.
I'll make sure to, I'll show that in when I edit the video. So.
yeah. But it got pretty big, and it's just died down now because, like, hopefully the COVID is kind of ending in that phase or whatever. But I think
it's pretty cool though how you end up having people come back to your life.
Yeah.
And I found COVID did that. I mean, the fact that GaleForceWins with myself and Alan. Alan's a friend of mine from 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Chris Badstone, did you ever work with Chris? He was Bucket Truck, I think, was his band.
Oh,
right? He used to work at VOCM.
Oh, Chris Badstone, Drive.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, he and his friend Adam Staple.
Yeah.
They used to be our record label. Well, they helped us, Potato Bug, back in the early '90s, to kind of promote us to go into the ECMAs back in the day, back in the mid '90s. So Chris is a good friend.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I worked with him when I was at VOCM.
Yeah.
Another friend of yours, unfortunately, who's passed away, and you've talked about him, is Fred.
Fred Gamberg. Yeah.
I don't know him. I know what happened, but I always remember driving on Duckworth Street and seeing his
that mural.
image.
Yeah.
Man. And I always felt sad a little bit, because I hear that he was just an incredible person. So let's take the opportunity just to mention him.
Well, I remember meeting Fred Gamberg from in the 80s. He was a friend of my sister's. At the time, I just remember like seeing him at the mall. We were all mall rats. And Fred was very into punk rock music. He bought me my first tape. It was 2 tapes actually. It was Ramones and The Clash, and he knew a lot about music. Like, and it wasn't just about punk.
Yeah.
He had a radio station at CHMR at Munn, and he was very like he and I operated a games arcade. We opened up a games arcade where the old Bagel Cafe was.
Seriously?
My parents had a Filipino restaurant down there.
Yeah.
And he and I opened up a games arcade for the kids at the time.
How old were you when you did that?
I was probably like early 20s or late teen, 19 or 20.
The entrepreneurial bug is all around you, isn't it?
As a kid, I always thought, like, when I grow up, I want to be a coin changer at a games arcade. And I fulfilled it. I was changing coins, tokens. But we grew up in the 90s. Like, I got close to Fred in the mid 90s because he was in a band called Giver, and we played together at the LSPU Hall. He was very extroverted. Like, he would talk to anybody. He would talk to you, and he would help enable all these young punk bands to get gigs at shows downtown to just kind of help expose for exposure.
Yeah.
So Fred did a lot of things for the community, and I always wondered what he would do now. Like I can see him, like being like something into podcasting, or like just some consultant with music, or some form, or who knows? Like he was a security guard at NL Hydro, or I think, or he worked as a security guard. So who knows what he could have done?
He was only young when he passed. Was he 20 something?
Yeah. Around how old was he? He was a little older than me. I'm 48, so he would have been like 52, or well. Yeah, he would have been 52 now, or 50.
You really got to grab hold of life, though, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
So, music. What are you doing to scratch that itch right now? You said you're still involved. What is it?
Well, I right now I'm still playing with my friend Brian, and this lady who just her name is Jingxia. She plays a gengzhu. It's a Chinese traditional instrument. And we're playing actually tomorrow at a Vanya event. So we're like collaborating with modern music and mixed with traditional instruments.
Wow.
So yeah, and she just got her PhD and with music and philosophy and music and stuff. So we just started collaborating, and every once in a while I try to like record music online and just doing my own stuff. RPM challenge. That's like where you try to write music within the month of February, and I did that, just trying to stay creative with music making. So
that's amazing. Yeah. It's funny as you're talking, I feel so one-dimensional. I'm a jazz trumpet player, and that's it. A little bit of classical every now and then.
Well, growing up with punk and rock music, I'm actually I have an interest with. They call it neo soul now. It's kind of a form of R&B and jazz, but it's. They call it neo soul because it's something about guitar playing over it, and it's like jazz. And I don't have any background in music theory and stuff, so that's what I find on my pastime is to go online and try to learn how to play it. So yeah. Jazz has become really interesting for me now.
It is. So we've traveled a good bit around your journey. You're currently working, you have your sideline.
Yep.
What do you envision, what's on the horizon over the next, say, 5-10 years?
That's interesting because I was just like going through my life insurance and my changing banks and stuff, and I'm talking about my pension and all this stuff, and going through the interview of like the banker asking you when do you want to retire, and I had thoughts like, like I'm counting down to retire. I think I'm still going to pursue what I'm doing, probably full time, like the photography. I'd love to just travel and take pictures. That's my dream. Saving up for like one of these like motorcycles or a van, or just to go drive and discover Canada or the US or anywhere, or fly to Philippines and just walk around and take pictures. That's what I would love to do.
Well, I can see that happening because what you're producing is some beautiful work. Really beautiful. It is. And as Alan and I have joked, for us to start and go from Zoom to, as I was telling you, we went to Greece and Turks and Caicos.
Yeah.
It's interesting, to be able to fulfill the dreams that you have.
Yeah.
And I think photography, you are recording things in the moment that are beautiful.
Oh,
and it gives people a moment to pause and reflect. So I think that's important in life.
Right.
One last thing before we clue it up. Given that you've been in various things, we always ask, what's a piece of advice that you would give? Say there's a young 20-year-old out there watching this. They're into various things similar to you. What advice would you give them?
Oh,
I know that's a tough
question.
one.
It's a big question, yeah. I don't know. Absorb as much as you can. Learn as much as you can, and if you find something that and that opportunity is there, is to go for it, I guess. But at the same time, like make sure that you're stable, or if you're a higher risk taker, to do it, do the things that you love. And I remember my parents were saying, like at the time when we first moved here, growing up as a teenager, they would be like, you have to be this, you have to be that, you have to be a lawyer, be a doctor, make a lot of money. And eventually they've eased off on that when they saw my sister and I later, having kids and working and doing things, and my mother said to us, is like, well, as long as you can live off of what you do and you are happy, then that's all you need is that. So yeah, like I'm content when I'm not like living luxuriously or whatever. I'm like spending all my money on my equipment, but it's like on guitars and I'm not saying go waste your money on stuff, but like I buy the things that I feel like that will benefit me for what to learn for what like what I want to do with my life. Like the cameras serve a purpose, and so I don't know. Like, is that an answer?
Listen, it's funny as you talk. I just bought a gimbal the other day.
Oh, did you?
I had a gimbal. For anyone who doesn't know, a gimbal is a stabilizer for video. When Alan and I were in Halifax, the one I had broke.
Yeah.
So I bought another one,
Yeah.
and this one can actually extend. And
Oh,
everything.
okay.
There's nothing more exciting for someone into photography and video is like a piece of technology.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, Ritchie? What I like about that is makes life interesting. Just I look at a product like a gimbal, and I think the mind that put that thing together.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it can make it, hold a camera and make it stable.
Yeah.
Like these guitars are beautiful. I'm gonna grab one if that's okay with you. This is an amazing machine, or not a machine, but it's just a musical instrument that the mind that put this together.
Oh yeah.
Like I think about the effort that goes into stuff like this.
Yeah.
And for me and you, I think we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, is there anything else you want to say to our audience?
Oh no, just like to say thanks for having me, and
Well, I can
Thank
tell you
you.
this. Yeah, well, thank you. As I said, I kind of snuck in there. There was a recording happening for another company Ritchie was hired to do, and I was asked to speak. And I said, I wonder if it's possible to sit with Ritchie and record an episode, which we did. So, Ritchie, I will tell you this, man. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I came in here not knowing a lot about you, and I think it's important to just share the stories. Keep doing what you're doing.
thank you.
GaleForceWins is really happy to have had you as a guest, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.